be part of this documentary about soccer. As you may know, my name is Cristiano Ronaldo, and I am a famous soccer player. Since soccer is a huge part of my life, I'm happy to share my story with you. I was born on February 5th, 1985, in Madrid, Portugal, to Maria and Jose Aveiro. I grew up with 2 sisters and 1 brother in a tin shack in a working-class neighborhood. I first came to love soccer at age 8. I played for a team called Andorra. It was a good starting point in my soccer career, but I knew I wanted more. So, between the ages of 8 and 16, I went from various teams and clubs until I was selected to play for the Portuguese First Division. I played my strongest for 1 year, hoping a premier team would take notice. Then, all of my hard work paid off. I was signed by Manchester United, a premier club in England. My dreams were coming true as I made my debut for Manchester United in August of 2003 against Bolton. All was going so well for 2 years until a major setback in 2005. My loving and supportive father died of liver disease. After mourning my father's death, I refocused my energy into my passion for soccer and came back strong and received the Young Player of the Year award. I know my dad would have been proud. The next season in 2008, my club, Manchester United, won the UEFA Champions League, ending this Premier League. In addition, I was picked as the FIFA World Player of the Year and European Player of the Year. In 2009, I was transferred to Real Madrid, one of the best clubs in Spain. I made my debut for Real Madrid in July of 2009 against the Shamrock Rovers. In 2010 and 2011, I broke several records and I won the Golden Boot Award. On a more personal note, on July 3rd, 2010, I became a dad. I am the father of Cristiano Ronaldo Jr. My son is the love of my life. Since soccer is a full-time job that requires a lot of practicing and traveling, I don't always have time to be with him. Thankfully, my mother and sisters can spoil him, take care of him when I'm gone. Although soccer and my son keep me extremely busy, I still find time to give back. I often visit children's hospitals to talk with and encourage children to always follow their dreams. I was so moved by many situations I encountered during my hospital visits that in 2010, I became a member of the Portuguese Association for the Fight Against Leukemia. I even donated my own bone marrow to help a young boy with his fight against leukemia. Whatever your fight might be, always follow your dreams. And remember, big things have small beginnings.
Nice to see you today, Richard. I'm always happy to give an interview to Life magazine. I've overcome a troubled childhood, criticism, and stereotypes just to be where I am today. I, Marilyn Monroe, was born on June 1st, 1926 in Los Angeles, California as Norma Jean Mortensen. My parents were Gladys Baker and Martin Mortensen, but I never knew my father. People say that growing up with no father figure had an impact on my life and acting career. Maybe, who knows. Due to my mother's poor mental health, I spent most of my childhood in orphanages, foster homes, or with family friends. I was abused several times in the orphanage. Fortunately, my Aunt Anna saved me from the abuse. She was the first person in the world I ever really loved. She was the only one who loved and understood me. When I was 15, I dropped out of high school, and when I was 16, I married Marine Jimmy Daughtry. In 1943, he was sent to the South Pacific, so I went to work in a munitions factory in Burbank. During that time, photographer David Canova discovered me, and I began my modeling career. Modeling was fun, but ever since I was a little girl, I dreamed of becoming an actress. In 1946, I signed my first contract with 20th Century Fox. My marriage to Jimmy was very real, but I wanted to be more than just Mrs. Daughtry, so we divorced later that same year. People didn't recognize me until my small role in the asphalt jungle in 1950. It was just 2 years later that y'all put me on the cover of Life for the first time. 1953 was a big year for me. I earned a lot of my fame from my roles in The 7-Year Itch and Gentlemen Prefer Blondes. In 1954, I married Joe DiMaggio, but sadly we divorced 9 months later. Joe wasn't ready for the life of fame. I may have been admired around the world and viewed as flawless, but I'm anything but. I have many insecurities and anxiety, which could make me very late or completely absent. Castmates and movie directors got angry at me, which is why I was dismissed from some movies. In 1956, I married playwright Arthur Miller. We were so happy and in love, I found out I was pregnant later that year, but sadly I suffered a miscarriage, then another in 1958. It was one of the hardest things I've ever dealt with. I wanted to have a child so much I was heartbroken. In 1960, I won the Golden Globe Best Actress in a Comedy for my performance in Some Like It Hot. I made a couple disappointing movies, and my love life wasn't going well. My marriage to Arthur Miller ended last year. Many thought I went from guy to guy, which is untrue. I love them all, but too often we don't realize what we have until it's gone. You may have heard I was in and out of several psychiatric hospitals seeking help. All I found was more loneliness and unhappiness. On May 19, 1962, I sang Happy Birthday, Mr. President to John F. Kennedy, which is my birthday gift to him. He is a wonderful man. Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure to be here.
Good evening, my fellow Americans. I've come to you tonight with my final thoughts as president. As you all know by now, I'm leaving office in 4 days and retiring. It's been a long and tiring career, but a happy one. Let me tell you about my earlier years and how I got here. I, Dwight D. Eisenhower, was born in Denison, Texas on October 14, 1890. I had 6 other brothers. I got my first job at age 13 before all of my other friends. It was a bad one though. I had to wash train cars. A couple of years later, I realized I wanted to do more with my life than wash cars. I wanted to graduate from college. My parents told me I could never do it and that it cost too much money. I didn't believe them, and eventually I earned enough to go, and so did all my brothers. I took a train to West Point Academy in New York. While I was in West Point, I was on the football team, but after a year, I had to quit because of an injury to my knee. After the injury, I didn't study nearly as much as I should have, but after 4 years, I was still in the top half of my class. In World War I wanted to join, but training duty stopped me from joining the war. After the war, I worked with some very important military officers and now some of my closest friends. I worked hard while I was in the military, and they had me rising quickly through the ranks. I rose to the rank of general mainly because of my leadership skills. Soon after World War II started, I was put in charge of many war plans, and I received a special mission to go to London and build cool operations within the Allies. Shortly after that, I was appointed Supreme Commander of the Allied Forces, as well as General of the Army with 5 stars. In June 1945 was the start of the end of the war in Europe, and I returned home to Albany, where they held a celebration for me. 5 months later, I was inaugurated as president of Columbia University. Shortly after that, I took up NATO. It seemed an impossible task. It turned my vision for Europe and the United States into reality. As I was working on this more and more, other people were working on the draft Eisenhower for President of the United States by public nomination, and it grew to something I could no longer ignore. I retired from all my military service in preparation for what was to come. What I campaigned on was unified trust and prospering times ahead. My slogan was "I like Ike." It worked well and was catchy. I became president on November 4th, 1952. I tried to balance the budget, and it was one of my top priorities. Some of my other goals were expanding Social Security and increasing minimum wage. I also started to run the NASA program. I was elected the next time for president by an even wider margin than the first. During my presidency, Hawaii and Alaska have joined the United States. I also helped build the interstate system. So I come to you tonight to say farewell. I'm retiring from office in just a few days. Now, I'm going to become a private citizen. I'm proud to do so. I look forward to it. Thank you, and good night.
Hi, Lakeport Aquatics. Thank you for inviting me to speak to you today about swimming. Swimming is a very fun sport. It may seem like a lot to come to practice for an hour and a half every day of the week, but in the end it turns out to be really fun. I remember my first swim team. It was when I was 6 years old. It was a competitive team named the Terrapins. I, Natalie Ann Coughlin, was born on August 23rd, 1982 in Blue Hill, California. After I swam for the Terrapins, I knew swimming was what I wanted to dedicate my time to. I was one of 2 children, so my parents were willing to take me to practice all the time. I swam all through high school and college, just as I assume most of you will do also. I attended Carteret High School, where I was named one of the nation's top young swimmers. For college, I went to University of California. All my friends were saying I should drop out of college and start a swim career. I was tempted my junior year to drop out, but I figured that even though I love swim, I should still get a good education. I finished college with the 2nd most NCAA titles in swimming history and University of California's most decorated female swimmer. I've competed in 12 Olympic events. My first Olympics were the 2004 Athens Olympics. I won 5 medals there and 6 in 2008. Last year, in the 2012 London Games, I won 1 medal. Overall, it's not the medals I focus on though. It's the joy of being able to swim. Ethan Hall, my husband, is a swim coach for all ages. Together we practice swimming, but leave time to do other activities. I'm sure most of you spend your days during the week going to swim and doing homework, but don't let swim be the only thing in your life. For example, my husband and I keep up with our farm and garden. On our farm, we keep chickens to get our fresh eggs from. Oh, looks like it's time for your practice to start. Remember to keep following your dreams and never give up. Thank you for listening and have fun at practice.
Thank you for inducting me into the Ultimate Fighting Championship, otherwise known as UFC Hall of Fame. As you all know, I'm Pat MILETICH. I'm a former UFC, otherwise known UFC welterweight champion. I was born on March 9th, 1969, born and raised in Bettendorf, Iowa, the youngest of 5. I have 3 brothers and 1 sister. Here's how my wrestling story started. In kindergarten, I got beat up by the middle school wrestling coach's son. I wanted to make sure it never happened again, so I started wrestling. It's a good motivator. I got pinned in just about every match for the first 3 years, but I didn't want to give up that easily. My dad wasn't home, so I wasn't focused on the things I should have been. I was a C student, and I got into a few fights. In 7th grade, I started playing football. In high school, I continued wrestling and playing football. Football was my first love. I wrestled to stay in shape for it. In my senior year, I took 2nd in the state in wrestling. I wanted better than 2nd, but I'll take it. I went to community college and wrestled. I planned on playing football, but ended up wrestling. I left in the middle of college to support my mom, who had heart problems. We can get off that subject. It's hard for me to talk about. After that, I trained for boxing with Elvino Peada. Then I started training in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu for a year and decided to quit boxing because mixed martial arts, otherwise known as MMA, would make me more money to support my mom. I entered my first ever MMA tournament in 1995, Battle of the Masters. I went undefeated for 15 fights before losing to Matt Hume. Then I decided to enter my first ever UFC tournament for the lightweight championship. I won the tournament and I was the champ. All the hard work had finally paid off. People ask me what it's like to be knocked out. In 1999, I fought Jatar on a cow. He put me in the triangle choke and I fell asleep. I had a dream that lasted 3 seconds but felt like an hour, where I was at a party and a live album was playing. When I woke up, I turned my head to the side and saw my opponent celebrating on the ropes. I was glad it was a non-title fight. I defended my title 3 times. The first time against John Alessio, the second time against Kenichi Yamamoto. In 2001, the weight classes changed and I became a welterweight. If you look at the UFC Lightweight Championship history, I won't be there. I'm considered the first ever UFC welterweight champion. I lost my title on May 4th, 2001 to Carlos Newton at the pay-per-view UFC 31. After that, I moved up to the middleweight division. I had my last fight on December 11th, 2008 at age 39 at the Alvarado Center versus Tommy Denny. He only lasted 50 seconds before I gave him a combo and knocked him out. After that, I've trained some fighters. I've trained 6 champions. I still live in Bettendorf, but today I don't train fighters. I'm a UFC commentator and I train kids and adults self-defense. I also work with cops and people in the military. I have an amazing wife named Lynn and 2 beautiful daughters. Thank you. Enjoy the rest of your night.
All right, I'm here for the interview, BBC. Let's get started. Start from the beginning. I was born to Gaetano Corsetti and Angela Corsetti in good old home, Steubenville, Ohio, in June 17 of 1917. As you all know, I was named Dean Martin. At first, I knew nothing but Italian, as my ancestors were, until I entered grade school. I was often picked on by others due to my, let's say, beautiful English. I also thought I was smarter than the teachers and everyone else. Today I know it's less than true. Anyway, I left school in 1933 thanks to my more than prideful attitude and began my life as a young man. I worked everywhere from backstreet illegal casinos to the 7-Eleven down the street. I also wrestled most of the time, until I began singing. I started in the early 40s at the age of 17, and I crooned like Crosby for a while until I got in my own style. I'd left Steubenville in 43 to get more popularity. Don't get me wrong, Steubenville is nice, but New York is the place to go if you want to hit it big. I sang at clubs and other underground places for a while, and I got well known throughout New York. Soon I got well known throughout New York, and I got a 6-week contract at Atlantic City, New Jersey. I got there, and little did I know, my life was about to get fabulous. I got there on July 26th of 1946, and a certain actor was missing. They wanted me to go on stage with Jerry Lewis. And boy, was that a star. His wacky antics and my style meshed. Crowds loved us. We went from club to club all over the States, and we were living a high life for a while. Well, to be honest, I wasn't too fond of him off stage, and let's say unfolded. The acts were over. We split. While it was a long run, everyone thought I was gone, long, long gone. I met up some other fellow entertainers, Sammy and Frank. We fit perfectly, and I got back in business. The club didn't accept a black Jew, Sammy, that we wouldn't go. It was because we supported several African American rights movements. We were originally called the Rat Pack, but we were originally called the Klan or even the Summit, but the Rat Pack stuck. We were getting everything from movie deals to television shows, and I settled down and got a wife and a kid, Paula and Dina. Now, just to set one rumor straight, I ain't got nothing to do with the mafia. Everyone thinks I do, but I don't. I just wanted to set that straight. Anyway, I lived in luxury, and I still do. Everything's been swell lately. Now I've got a surprise for all of you, and unfortunately it isn't a good one. The doc says I got lung cancer, and he says I ain't gonna live long. Ain't that a kick in the head? Now have a good night.
Thank you. I'm extremely honored to accept this trophy for winning the 1954 U.S. Women's Open. This victory was a hard-fought battle and is perhaps the key to my career, because it comes just 14 weeks after my radical surgery to help fight colon cancer. Fighting for what I want is certainly not new to me. I, Mildred Ellie Dixon ZAHARIAS, better known to all of you as Babe, was born in Port Arthur, Texas on June 26, 1914. My parents are Ollie and Hannah Didrikson. As a young girl, I announced that my goal was to become the greatest athlete that ever lived. Most people just laughed at me, because girls at the time were expected to use an iron while doing chores, not swinging on the golf course. I attended Beaumont High School in 1926. I wasn't a very good student, but I was a phenomenal athlete. I played volleyball, tennis, baseball, swimming, and basketball. Basketball at the time was the most popular sport for girls, and thanks to my ability to shoot the ball, my team went undefeated. My success on the court didn't make me too popular with the other girls. They didn't think I was very ladylike. I didn't really care that I wasn't a typical girl. In fact, I think it made me even more determined to reach my goal. In 1930, I got a job with the Employers Casualty Company of Dallas and played basketball for their team, the Golden Cyclones. I led the Golden Cyclones to the national championships in 1931 and earned All-American honors that same year. I loved basketball, but I wanted a new challenge. So in 1932, I joined the company's track and field team and was sent to the AAU track meet in Evanston, Illinois as team of one. To everyone's surprise, but my own, I won the entire track meet. I won 6 gold medals and broke 4 world records on that day. Many consider my performance to be the most outstanding achievement by any track and field athlete of all time. My performance earned me a spot on the 1932 U.S. Olympic team. I competed in 3 events. I ran the 80-meter hurdles, won gold, and broke the world record. I also won gold and set the Olympic record in the javelin. My final event was the high jump, in which I won silver due to a penalty. I returned home to Dallas as an international celebrity and earned Associated Press's Women's Athlete of the Year for 1932. In 1933, the golf bug hit me, and it was permanent. Making a living as a golfer wasn't easy, so I started playing exhibition matches against other male golfers. At an exhibition match is where I met George ZAHARIAS, one of the only people who could outdrive me on the golf course, and we were married on December 23, 1938, and he became my manager. My golf game continued to improve, and in the 1946-47 seasons, I won 17 consecutive golf tournaments, and was the first American to win the British Women's Amateur. My golf streak has never been matched by any other golfer, male or female. I yearned for more competition and prize money that matched the men's. So in 1949, I helped form the Ladies Professional Golf Association, or the LPGA. Many of the best golfers joined the league, but my power and showmanship made me the star. My goals for the rest of the season are to continue to play spectacular golf, and are to win Women's Athlete of the Year for the 6th time. As you know, winning has meant a lot to me, but winning friends has meant the most. I thank you all for supporting and encouraging me, but most of all, I thank you for being my friend.
God's gift to us is life. What we do with that life is our gift to God. That is what my wife, Ruby, and I, Herschel Williams, always said, and what I still believe today. I'm happy to be here at the National World War II Museum in New Orleans for the recording of oral histories. Now, shall we get started? Now let me see. It all started back in Quiet Dells, West Virginia. I was born into a dairy farming family on October 2nd, 1923. I went to Rivermont, West Virginia Elementary and High School. My friends and I loved to listen to the stories of the people from our community who had joined the military. They were so interesting that it made me decide to join. The first time I enlisted, I was denied because I was too short, but on May 26, 1943, I was accepted after they lowered the height requirement because of World War II. I was then sent to boot camp. After a few weeks in training, I was sent to Guadalcanal, where we were taught other battle plans and tactics. Along with this, I joined a group for demolition and flamethrower specialists. Then, on February 2nd, 1945, we landed on the beach of Iwo Jima. We were fighting the Japanese, who were in pillboxes, and those were what held us back for hours and hours. And it would have stayed that way, except one factor changed it. That was when the American flag went up on Mount Suribachi, and we all got inspired and reminded what we were fighting for. The commander in charge of the battle called a meeting of all the COs and CFOs in a large shell crater near the beach. He asked if anyone had an idea that would give us the advantage, and then he turned to me and said, "This isn't my idea, but do you think you could take out some of those pillboxes?" And I said, "I'll try." So I took Vernon Waters, who had been my assistant for a while now, strapped on a flamethrower, and ran to a shell crater near a pillbox. Over the next 4 hours, I took out 7 pillboxes, and when we crested the next hill, tragically, Vernon was hit on the head with a mortar. Now, before he had died, we were closer than brothers, and each of us had a ring. He had one from his parents, and I had one from my fiancée, Ruby. We promised each other that if something happened to one of us, the other would take the other person's ring and bring it back to who they had received it from. Now, taking something off of the body of a dead soldier was a martial offense, but keeping a promise meant a lot to me. And I did return that ring when I went home in September 1945. A few weeks after I returned home, I was called to the White House, which at the time seemed normal. I didn't know I was going to receive the Congressional Medal of Honor, though. I thought I was just going to receive the Purple Heart since I had been wounded. When I arrived there on October 5th, 1945, people were congratulating me a bit more than I thought I deserved. When I learned that I was being awarded the highest military award possible in America, I was stunned. A few special things have come with the Congressional Medal of Honor, such as if I go to any meeting, no matter what rank people in the military are, they treat me as a superior. Also, it has allowed me to go to every single presidential inauguration since Kennedy's. I did get married to Ruby, who is sadly dead now, but I do have 2 daughters, Tracy and Trevi, and I have a few grandchildren and great-grandchildren, and I currently live in Milton, West Virginia. Since I was awarded the Congressional Medal of Honor, I have helped many people with PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, and I have opened many military museums and hospitals. Now, speaking of openings, I have to get going so I can make it to a museum opening in Chicago. Thank you for your time, and remember, God's gift to us is life. What we do with that life is our gift to God.
Government of the people, by the people, and for the people shall not perish from this earth. This is what I said on June 1st, 1865 in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, and what I'm telling you all now. People created the government, not just a few, but all of us. I, Abraham Lincoln, was born on February 12, 1809 in Hodgenville, Kentucky, to Thomas and Nancy Hanks Lincoln. Growing up, I had to work for my own money, and sometimes my parents worked me so hard I felt like a slave. When I was 8, my family was forced to move to Prairie Country, Indiana. Sadly, a year later, my mother died of milk sickness. A few months later, my father remarried. My stepmother was Sarah Bush Johnson. I had been very close to her, and she encouraged me to read and write. When I was 22, I moved to New Salem, Illinois to start my own life. I worked as postmaster and store manager. Both jobs helped me with my social skills and storytelling. During this time, I met my first love, and my coach. Sadly, before I asked her to marry me, she got sick of typhoid fever and died. This is a very difficult time for me and left me extremely depressed. After the Black Hawk War, I began my career in politics and was elected to the Illinois State Legislature in 1834, as the only member of the Whig Party. Early on, I realized slavery was a big economic wrong and a moral wrong in my belief. I vowed to do something about it. Becoming a lawyer was a good place to start. So, in 1837, I moved to Springfield, Illinois to study law. A year later, I met Mary Todd, a high-spirited, highly educated woman, and married her on November 14, 1842. We had 4 children, but sadly, 3 of them died, which left me again feeling very depressed. So one way I tried to deal with it was by telling stories. This sometimes made people around me crazy. In 1858, I challenged Stephen Douglas for a seat as senator. In my nomination speech, I criticized Douglas, the Supreme Court, and President James Buchanan for promoting slavery. I thought it was wrong, so I said so. This got me a lot of attention, because I should run for president. I accepted the challenge, and on November 6, 1860, I was elected to the 16th president of the United States. At the time, the Union was on the brink of war with the Confederacy. So then, in 1861, the Civil War began. On January 1st, 1863, I signed the Emancipation Proclamation, which freed all slaves in the Confederate States, but unfortunately not the border states. However, on January 31st, 1865, I passed the 13th Amendment, which freed all slaves. It was a very hard battle, but I succeeded, and finally, on April 18, 1865, the Civil War ended. Some people believe my presidency was important because it kept the Union together and freed the South. However, what is truly important is the belief that all men and women are treated equally. I've changed America. I don't know that, and I wanted from the start. Thank you all so much for listening, but now I must go to Ford City with my wife to see our American president.
Hello to you all. It is a pleasure to be back at Perkins Institute for the Blind and talk to some of you students. As you know, my name is Ann Sullivan, and I helped Helen Keller talk to the world. I could have never helped her reach where she was unless I'd been able to attend Perkins. Here is my story. I was born on April 12, 1868 in Feeding Hills, Massachusetts. My mom died of tuberculosis when I was young, and my father, not wanting to care for my brother and I, left us at the orphanage. Sadly, several months later, my brother Jimmy died of tuberculosis. Yet after his death, I grew determined to study. The principal at the time, Mr. Anagnos, and the superintendent decided that I should attend Perkins. That is how, on March 14, 1880, I arrived at the kindergarten class here. However, instead of learning how to read, I learned how to recognize strength. This angered me since I only came here because I wanted to read. Along with that, my classmates made fun of me because of my broken English. However, one teacher helped me through my experience at Perkins, and I was able to control my temper. I eventually learned proper English and was able to graduate in June of 1886. A year after my graduation, I received a letter. I was to go to Captain Keller's house and help his daughter, Helen Keller. By now, you've heard of the famous Helen Keller. On October 7, 1887, I arrived at the Keller's house. I was attacked by her when I came in. She was looking for the sweets I had in my pocket. In my teaching of Helen, I had her separated from the family so I could teach her without interference from her parents. In the beginning, I struggled, and just when I was about to give up, Helen suddenly wanted to learn. It was a miracle. I'd finally gotten through to her. In order for her to understand what I was saying, I had to spell letters into her hand. This got her excited, and she soon wanted to learn more. After 9 years of working with each other, Helen was ready for college. But the college she wanted to go to rejected her, so we headed back here. By now, the press had taken a special interest after she had learned to speak. When she spoke, it sounded unnatural. So unnatural that the press wanted to know more about her not being able to speak normally. This angered me. This is not what I wanted for her. I wanted to give her a normal life, even though she was deaf and blind. In my anger, I said that I was in charge of her and I had total control over her. That was a bad idea. The press heard my statement and put me in the headline. Then Helen wrote a story for Mr. Anagnos. But the story was the same one I'd read to her just a few months before. Mr. Anagnos accused me of forcing Helen to plagiarize since she was too naive to understand what she was doing. This argument ended our friendship, and Helen and I decided to leave Perkins in 1903. We wanted to write a story on Helen's life, and we found a Harvard professor who agreed to help us. His name was John Macy. Macy and I fell in love and got married on May 3rd, 1905, but divorced 3 years afterward. I still miss him and don't know what went wrong in our marriage. My eyesight is also failing me now. Be thankful that you are at Perkins and can learn even though you are blind. Perkins helped me when I was a young girl, and it will help you. I have only one more thing to say to you. Keep on beginning and failing. Each time you fail, start all over again, and you will grow stronger until you have accomplished a purpose. Not the one you began with, perhaps, but one you will glad to remember. Thank you.
Aloha, Rivermont Collegiate. Today I will tell you about my story of faith, family, and getting back up on the board. Most of you know me from my movie Soul Surfer, or from the newscast about how I survived a shark attack at the young age of 13. I, Bethany Hamilton, was born February 8, 1990, and I'm a professional surfer from Kauai. It all started when I was 5 years old. My mom and dad taught me how to surf, and I accepted Jesus into my heart. I had a pretty normal life, but I did not go to school. My mom homeschooled me and my best friend Alana so that we could surf during the day and catch a good break. My parents and older brothers supported me and wanted me to become a professional surfer as well. Other than that, my life was like any other surfer. I surfed hard and entered as many competitions as I could. Now, let me set the scene for you. Halloween morning, 2003. Alana and I went surfing with her dad and brother in the very early hours of the morning. I'm talking 7 a.m. The waves were nothing exciting. We were around a quarter mile away from shore, and I was lying on this board, with my left arm just dangling in the water. Then, out of nowhere, a 15-foot tiger shark pulls me off my board and into the water. It was so fast, the only thing I felt was a few short tugs, followed by a lot of pressure. Alana was only 5 feet away from me. She saw everything, except for the shark coming. When I emerged from the water, I said calmly, I was just attacked by a shark. That's all my 13-year-old brain could think to say at the time. I got back up on my board and saw the water turning bright red around me. I became faint, and I started to paddle toward shore. When I got ashore, Alana's older brother had called the ambulance, and her dad was tying his rash guard around my 2-inch stub as a tourniquet. At the hospital, I had a few surgeries to remove some nerves and get all stitched up. I had a lot of people visiting me. Friends, family, and complete strangers. Of course, the press swarmed once they heard what happened. After getting out of the hospital, my life consisted of hiding from the media and doctor checkups. I wasn't allowed to surf for quite some time because of my surgeries. That was way too hard. I mean, I'd been in the water for at least an hour each day surfing since I was 5, and now I couldn't surf at all. But I couldn't stay away from the water. I would go down to the beach with my friends and get about knee-high in the ocean. Everyone thought I would never surf again. And at one point, so did I. But my parents and older brother wouldn't let me give up on my dream and everything I had worked for. My dad even made me a special surfboard. I've trained hard and practiced even harder to achieve my goal of being as good as I was before the attack. And after time, I exceeded my goal and became better than I was. This is what got me to the pro circuit. Life is a lot like surfing. When you get caught in the impact zone, you've got to just get back up on the board, because you never know what might be over the next wave. That's my advice to you. Thank you for having me here this morning.
Good evening, and it's an honor to be invited onto PBS's Austin City Limits. So let me tell you guys about myself. I, Eric Patrick Clapton, was born in 1945 in a small flat in Ripley, England. But my 16-year-old mom left me to my grandparents, so I grew up thinking that they were my parents. I was as every kid. I went to school and played with my friends until my grandparents told me everything. I became distant, and that's where I found the blues, and I was hooked.
Robert Johnson and Muddy Waters were my idols. So I begged and begged for a guitar, and my grandparents finally got me one. I was accepted into Kingston Art School, and that's where I went to my first pub. I woke up one night in the middle of the woods in a pile of my own vomit with no money, and I wanted to do it all over again. I loved the rush. I considered myself a fine artist, but I got no work done. I was too busy in pubs or playing the guitar, or both at the same time. Then I was invited to my first real band, the Yardbirds, and I took off from there. I went from band to band until I was kicked out of art school for not getting any work done. I moved back to my grandparents' house and worked for my grandpa in construction. I got back into music and made a career out of it, touring with John Mayall and the Blues Breakers. That's when I hit it big. People started writing Clapton is God all over London. So I formed Cream with two of my buddies, and we took off on American and European tours. I got to play with some of my idols, but I was introduced to dope, and I loved it. I can't remember a time back then I wasn't high. I continued on with Cream, but we broke up. It just stopped being about the music. I went into my solo career and got deeper and deeper into drugs. I became addicted to heroin. That's when, in 1979, I married Patty Boyd, my good friend George Harrison's ex. I went through a rehab before Narcotics Anonymous, but only replaced drugs with alcohol. I continued on my solo career, but fostered other children while touring, so she divorced me. I went into deep depression and drinking. I was commanded by my friends to join Alcoholics Anonymous and do the 12-step program. I've been sober ever since. I reemerged onto the music scene only to be devastated by the death of my 2-year-old son Connor in 1991. I finished my new album Unplugged, but badly damaged. Then in 1998, I opened up my own alcohol and drug rehab center in Antigua. I met my love, Malai McHenry, and we got married in 2001. I'm the happiest I ever have been. Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much. It's an honor to be here tonight to perform for you here in Indianapolis. To think I've been playing for 42 years. I, Elvis Presley, was born on January 8, 1935 in a two-room farmhouse in Louisville, Mississippi. My birth name was Vernon Elvis Presley. I felt mighty sorry when I learned that my twin Jessie was a stillborn. For my 11th birthday, my loving parents, Glasson and Vernon, bought me a guitar. I loved to play. At times my pa couldn't prod my guitar away. I later bought a black Yamaha and I loved it. I took it to most of my concerts. I began school but did not go to college. Instead, I used the extra time to practice. In 1948, we packed up and moved to Memphis, Tennessee. Here I began singing with the legendary Sun record label. In 1955, I sold my records to RCA Victor, a large record company. In 1956, Colonel Parker became my manager. I sang pop, country, and rock and played sax, piano, and guitar. I not only sang, but I starred in 33 successful films, including Jailhouse Rock, a movie based off of one of my songs. In 1957, I bought Graceland at age 22. I bought it because I was tired of fans running around my old neighborhood house. Graceland is built on a 13.5-acre lot in South Tennessee. Built in 1939, it has 40 rooms and 3 floors. In 1958, I signed up for the Memphis Draft Board for the Army. I was shipped out and spent 18 months in Germany. That's where I met Priscilla. It was at my German house and we had a party. I came back to the States and brought her with me. 7 years later, in 1967, we got married on the second floor of the DOLAN Hotel in Las Vegas. Then, in 1968, my pride and joy was born, Lisa Marie Presley. I adored her and called her Lisa and Buttonhead. She made a mess of Graceland, but I didn't care. I'm so proud she became a singer too. In 1972, Priscilla and I divorced because I could never be home. Although we divorced, we still remain close. Let's start off the music with Jailhouse Rock.